So our guest today is the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Cook County. He has served in this position for nearly 8 years. The Housing Authority of Cook County is the second largest provider of affordable housing in the state of Illinois. And we also have the first largest, right there, Gene Jones. Wave to everybody, Gene. He's going to be speaking here in a couple weeks. There we go. Our guest today earned his bachelor's degree in political science from UIC. He is the enormously proud father of two fabulous, incredibly athletic sons, Nathaniel and Nicholas. Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Monocchio. Rich? All right.
Thank you very much, Jay. Jay's been kind enough to have me here through a number of different positions I've held, and it's great to be back, Jay. Thank you. And it's great to see so many familiar faces and friends here from a long time in public service. So I want to, first, I decided to do it a little differently today. When you're somewhere for 8 years, I mean, you should get some stuff done, right? So I thought that, nothing says it better than pictures. So Nick has put together a wonderful show. So I'm going to narrate a little, but I think, the work we do and the people we touch, I think the pictures tell a lot. So I'm very, appreciate your indulgence on that, but I think you'll enjoy it this way. I want to recognize some folks real quickly too. Our great board who has been with us the whole way. So everything you see today that's been accomplished has been accomplished on their watch. Our chairman, Paul Roldan. Paul, thank you. Our vice chairperson, Wendy Walker-Williams. Wendy, thank you. Our esteemed board member, Sal Klibanow. Sal, thank you. Of course, you don't do any of this without a team that goes above and beyond, and we have a number of those folks here today. I've had the great good fortune of leading a lot of teams in my career, and this one is second to none. The knowledge, dedication, and passion that they show every day is amazing. And I want, please, my team to stand up so we can recognize you. Thank you. So, we're coming off a pretty exciting week here in the city politically, and housing probably isn't the first thing on a lot of folks' minds, but it will be a very, very hot topic as we go forward, I think, in every election, because it's a problem that has become, more acute as the years have passed. And when we think about affordable housing, we think about, helping folks that very poor folks, older people, people with disabilities, and that's all true. But the fact is that today, housing instability hits people from all different income strata. And it's a national problem. And, as we know, when things rise up to scale and affect more people, we tend to see some action. So I think we're on the cusp of some exciting things in the housing world. And at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think some of the things that can be done nationally and locally to really make more houses and apartments affordable for people. But first, I want to talk about, what we have done, who we are, and how we've approached this issue in Cook County. So, my friend Gene does run the largest housing authority in Cook County. I was there in the 90s when HUD took over. So I kind of came full circle from housing authority and back, and it's a different world. I think housing authorities, Gene would probably agree, that we do so much more today than was the case 30 years ago. And we serve almost 18,000 households in Cook County. That's a lot of people. And as you can see from the chart here, we have housing and we have voucher holders in all 103 communities. We have housing in about 24, but voucher holders live in apartments all over the county. So as you can imagine, that's a large territory to cover, and it's a lot of different housing markets, right? In Cook County, we have some of the poorest suburbs in the country and also some of the wealthiest. So that creates different challenges for us. The one thing we have strived to do is to make all communities available to everybody we serve. So I mentioned quickly the problem we have nationally. You know, this kind of says it. It's just a shortage. I mean, we're 7 million apartments or houses short. I mean, 1 in 4 renters in this country pays more than 50% of their income for rent, 1 in 4. But, on the other hand, only 1 in 4 people who need the housing assistance, who qualify for it, receive it, because the budgets just aren't sufficient. So, the fact is, you know, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, government has to be involved one way or the other in the production or incentivizing housing development, because without it, we'd have virtually zero housing available for lower income people. So one way or another, the government has to be involved, and I'll talk a little more about that later. So while it's a national problem, of course, it's here in Cook County, it's a problem as well, obviously. We have as we see, the affordability gap in the county has risen over the years. It's really a classic case. If you look at this, it's high demand, but lower supply. You know, in terms of construction and building, we haven't built as much as we have in this country, at least in the last decade. And what we see, not unfortunately, it's good to build high-end housing. A lot of great people live in high-end housing. I love high-end housing, but we need more than high-end housing. So that's one issue. And the other is, simple fact, you know, over the last 20 years, we've seen housing prices go like this, but wages like this. So obviously, there's going to be a mismatch. And now I think it's reaching a crisis situation. Another relatively recent development that we've seen is the suburbanization of poverty. You know, for the longest time, that wasn't the case. The good news, of course, is that we've seen a revival of central cities, including Chicago, which is a great thing. You know, having lower the poverty rate amongst kids in the city declining in a 10-year period is pretty impressive. What's happened, though, inversely, is we've seen a rise in poverty in the suburbs. And it's a pretty stark showing of this map here. We've seen while the poverty anywhere is not good, in the city, and I worked in the city for a long time, you have infrastructure in the city that isn't always there in the suburbs. You have libraries, community centers, you know, not-for-profits that have done this for a long time, but that's not the case in the suburbs. In the suburbs, for the most part, they're more isolated with less services. So we have a different set of challenges to deal with in this particular environment. So when I got here, I guess it's 8 years now, we had 2,500 apartments that were in various stages of disrepair, a lot of vacant units, and it really wasn't clear to me at the time how we were going to address that. So we had a plan. The plan was to first rehabilitate the solid housing stock that we have, the high-rises, and we've done that. We started in 2014, and by the time we're finished, all of the housing in the Cook County Housing Authority, virtually all the housing will be rehabbed. So what that means is, for another 30 or 40 years, we'll have a solid housing stock for some of our most vulnerable people. So that was the strategy. Let's preserve what we have, because it's 1/3 the cost to rehabilitate an apartment versus building new. So I think it was a solid financial strategy as well. So by the time, as of today, we've got developments completed in Evanston, Skokie, Arlington Heights. Work is being completed now in Niles, Wheeling, Harvey, Chicago Heights, Park Forest, and Robbins. Construction's underway in Des Plaines and in Franklin Park, and we're going to start later this year in Ford Heights and at our scattered site developments in Evanston and Wheeling. So that's a lot of work, and we're very happy to say that it's, again, when I got to, it's not easy. It's a lot of funding sources. You need a lot of help from a lot of different people, and I'll mention those folks as we go along. I'll do it right now. It doesn't happen without, as I mentioned before, without government, either tax incentives or subsidies, none of this gets done, none of it. So my friend Audra Hammernick from IDA has been a great partner for Cook County. I have to say, Audra, thank you. The various tax credits, the federal tax credit being the most important. And then, of course, the Cook County's role with federal home dollars. President Preckwinkle's leadership and vision on this issue is well known. She's been a stalwart for housing and community development for her entire career. And she really went to bat for us, because without the county's assistance with gap funding, none of these projects would have reached fruition. So when it's all said and done, we will have invested $200 million in our properties in Cook County. $200 million. It's a lot. It's a lot for government. It's a lot for anybody. We've made structural, mechanical changes, roofs, apartments, et cetera, but also the interiors of the structures. I mean, a lot of folks who have been living in our buildings have not had new flooring, for example, for 20 years. So, it's a huge life change for people. And as you can see from the next slides, the testimonials from our residents really are, they say it much better than I ever could. I mean, young lady, Natasha, handicapped child, it's like everything is made for her. Oh, on cue. Madam President, welcome.
Hey.
Thank you very much for coming. I just wanted to say, no public servant, ever since I've been president, has attended more events and had her leadership team like Rich Monocchio come than President Preckwinkle. We are enormously grateful. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I was advised to come early and be sure that I could thank everybody for being here to support Rich, and then, of course, life intervened. But I just want to let you know that I am very grateful for his service. It's a very tough job to lead a public housing agency, and he's done it with grace and enthusiasm, and I'm deeply indebted to him. And I apologize that I didn't get to be here before his remarks, and I'm interrupting him now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. You got here right after I said a bunch of great things about you, too. So everybody here will vouch for that. It's all right. So again, the testimonials from our residents, and President Preckwinkle's been to a lot of these groundbreakings with us, and she's heard the folks. When you hear the people, see them talk and go into their houses, I mean, people being able to live in dignity again is something we all probably take for granted, but it's really so heartwarming when you see it. I mean, this building here in Harvey was really 147 apartments that were really in bad shape. And there was a lot of crime and drug activity in the building and in the surrounding area, but it's a fight every day. So not only do you have to fix the housing, you've got to really help the people at the same time. I mean, there's certain folks that just can't continue to live in the housing if they don't follow the rules, and those folks have to be evicted. But for the most part, we've been able to make our buildings and our communities much safer. And When you can go out to a site and you see kids playing outside, that for me is the key to everything, because that tells you that it's safe. When I started going to one of our developments in Robbins, I mean, it was nobody out. And 8 years later, I'm happy to say you can see kids playing, and you see kids on the swings and the basketball courts and the playgrounds we built, and it's truly a privilege to do that for people. So the bricks and mortar part are important because you have to have a solid roof over your head. But the other half of what we do, the human side, to me is the more important part. And we've really invested a lot of time and energy, myself, and I take this part of the job very seriously, and it's the best part. Things like the Forest Preserve experience, with the assistance of President Preckwinkle and Forest Preserve President Arnold Randall. We're able to have kids go for 5 weeks out into the forest. They may never have been there before. Work, team building, learn about nature, learn about the environment, and then hopefully use those skills as they complete school and go on with their lives. We also have a very strong back-to-school program and after-school programs. When I got there, I really wanted to make sure the kids that we served had the school supplies when they go to school, and because a lot of them didn't. So that was the first thing we did, and we also made sure that the kids in the summer got at least 2 good meals, because a lot of the kids most of the kids that we work with are part of the school lunch program. So in the summer, of course, not being in school, so we made our sites with Catholic Charities, I might add, who's with us today. We made those sites feeding centers as well. One of the other impactful things we've done with a group called 1 Million Degrees is send young adults and high school seniors back to college. So through the Hack Scholar program, we've got programs in South Suburban College and Prairie State in the south, Harper College in the north. We're sending hundreds of young people, some older too, there's no age limit, back to school, either get a degree, get a certificate, and the key, of course, is making sure that they have the tools, because if you have kids and you're working, you need more support. So we have mentoring, we have tutoring, we have stipends, and so Priscilla, really proud of her. She actually now is a housing manager for us in Park Forest. Is that amazing or what? Running a whole building. She started as one of our residents and went through 1 Million Degrees, and now she's one of the leaders of our agency. The getting people back on their feet, of course, is a big part of what we do. I mean, ideally, with when you have a shortage of affordable housing, the best thing to do is to get folks who can take care of themselves and become self-sufficient, so more people can then follow them and be housed and reach self-sufficiency. So our self-sufficiency program is 300 strong a year. Wonderful stories. A lot of times the children come, or the parents come with the kids. So it's so heartwarming. I mean, you see this generational change, right? We're making an impact on today, but also on kids in the future. And to see success and to feel success, I think, is such an important part of life that we probably all take for granted. But when you see the looks on people's faces after they graduate, for example, maybe they started a business, maybe they bought a house. We had 60 new homeowners in 2018, and that puts us close to 100, I think, for the program, and it's building every day. And even though this is a rental program, the housing, you can buy a house with a housing choice voucher, and building wealth buying a house is one of the primary ways to build wealth, as we all know, and building wealth is so key to the future. So this is a program that we will be growing as well as we mature as an agency. So, a few more innovative things that we do. The Community Choice Program. One of the things that President Preckwinkle did in 2014 was to get a source of income protection passed, an amendment to the Cook County Human Rights Ordinance. Very important, because that means that anybody with a voucher now has a right to move wherever they want. So you can't look in the paper now and see an ad that says no Section 8 taken here. Those days are over, thanks to President Preckwinkle's leadership. So what has that done for us? It's opened up a wide array of communities. And, you know, it takes education too, of course. And this morning we had a big realtor landlord forum in Rolling Meadows. So, you know, education is important. If people hear about the program, we talk them through it. I think it demystifies it, it destigmatizes it. And I'm happy to say, while we still see, of course, instances of discrimination, I found that people have open ears and open minds. Of course, we can't turn our backs on the communities that where most of our folks live and a lot of our buildings are. So we've partnered with the county and the JAC, Justice Advisory Council, on a pretty innovative grant with Youth Guidance, who's with us today. They run a great program in the city now, but it's coming out to the suburbs to help young people in the schools. So it's Becoming a Man. I think it's The Wonders of Womanhood. Rebecca, is that it? Working on Womanhood. I knew it was wow. It is really great. I'm going to have a chance to go out there next week, I think. It's a wonderful program. And being in the schools, of course, is so important, right? That's where this positive change and this mentorship has to happen, in the schools. That's why after-school programs are so important. Head Start is huge. We're trying to get every one of our young parents with kids into early Head Start or Head Start. So here, I mean, these next few slides, just kids learning and having fun, right? That we need to create a space for all kids to be able to learn and have fun, all kids. Not from this zip code or that zip code, because it's through no fault of their own, all right? We've got to help all of our kids, and that's what we strive to do here in the Cook County Housing Authority. Before I get to the future a little, one other thing I want to point out, and it's a pretty big deal. We launched a website late last year. It's a virtual social service network that President Preckwinkle announced at the Union League Club last November. It's really a wonderful resource for the suburbs. Again, you know, in the city things are more integrated, but you have 103 communities. We need, you know, you need to connect the dots. So you can go on this website, bewell.thehack.org. You punch in your zip code, you find out where the nearest county health center is. You find out where the nearest after-school program is. It's really, and we work with a lot of partners on this, but you know, we thought it was so necessary because, again, the services in the suburbs, while they're there, they're more fragmented, harder to access. So bewell.org is something that we are going to grow in the future. So the future, I'll finish with the future. So as I mentioned, I wanted to make sure all of our properties were stabilized and rebuilt. $200 million of investment, we've done that. But we really have to add to the housing stock. I mean, we've got a supply problem, as we saw in earlier slides, and a deficit in housing. So we started in Chicago Heights. Great partnership with the mayor there and with the Cook County Office of Economic Development. We were the first suburb in the country to get a planning grant from HUD, a Choice Neighborhoods Planning Grant, to rebuild Chicago Heights. So that is in progress. Hopefully we are successful next year in getting a bigger federal grant to build the housing, and it's also going to have a veterans housing component. Evanston, very exciting. This will be a foray for us into new development, additional new development. We have a 13-story high-rise in Evanston planned. This is going to be a mixed-income high-rise. When I sat down with the mayor in Evanston, he pointed out that we have this missing middle that we all have heard of, right? We got the high end, as I mentioned before, and we have vouchers for poorer folks, but this missing middle. So we are going to build a building that has a number of different rent targets so folks in and around Evanston don't get priced out of that suburb. Again, we've seen a lot of high-end housing downtown Chicago and Evanston. We need more. We need housing that people can afford. So I promised, as I finish, some broader solutions to the problem. I was lucky enough to work at HUD in D.C. in the Clinton administration, so I also worked on Capitol Hill. So the policy part of this has always been very near and dear to me. There's really three, I kind of break it down three ways. How can we get more housing built? How can we get more housing built that people can afford? The number one I'll start with is regulatory. A lot of people in the industry on the development side, the apartment association side, I think they put a little too much on this. Like, boy, if we cut all that government red tape, we could build anything. Well, we've cut a lot of government red tape, let me tell you. I mean, I was building commissioner in the city, so I know the codes pretty well, but there are a few things that can be done. I think all localities and states have to look at their building and zoning codes. We need to do things to encourage more multifamily housing. This is being done all over the country. You know, basically that means upzoning, but that doesn't mean you got to build a high-rise everywhere. Maybe a two-story townhouse on a corner. You get 2 units instead of 1, they're more affordable. And then what's also started is building more and higher density on transit and bus lines. Very important. The second thing is, you know, and I alluded to this, the supply of housing. We have a deficit of 350,000 homes and apartments every year in the country. So we get further behind every year. And as I mentioned, and without government incentives, creation of moderate and affordable housing will not happen. So what do we do about that? Well, got a proven way to build housing. It's a low-income housing tax credit. Great public-private partnership. That can be doubled. Create or preserve 200,000 units a year instead of 100,000. The federal home program that I alluded to earlier can be doubled. So we can provide that gap financing as well. You know, you might say, well, how does that happen, Rich? I mean, you know, we got these deficits. Well, you know, there's things you can do in the tax code, which is a whole different speech. But in an infrastructure bill, housing's part of infrastructure. So hopefully at the state level as well, we see that housing is part of the bill because it needs to be. You know, we have to invest in our housing just like we invest in our roads and our bridges. The last thing is, this is pretty, I mean, it seems pretty simple, but I think oftentimes we don't think about it. Wages, right? As I mentioned before, if you have housing prices going like this and wages going like this for 25 years, of course there's going to be a shortage. There's going to be a gap between what people can afford and what's being built. So increasing minimum wage laws are huge. I mean, millions of people are going to be helped by this. So, you know, instead of having to work 80 hours a week in a minimum wage job to afford an apartment, you know, if you can make $5 or $6 more an hour, you can afford a place. So we see this happening at the local level, the state level, and I think that'll help to close this gap we have and hopefully put us on the path to really a more equitable society. With that, I will close and say thank you for your listening today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Rich, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, remember, wow. Working on women, don't forget it, not this year, not in this age. It gets you in trouble.
Right.
Okay. So we have time for some questions. So if anybody has any questions that have not been collected, here we go. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. The first one comes from Josh Schwartz, City Club member who's with Retirement Plan Advisors. What are your views on the growing movement to institute rent control in Illinois?
It's a good question, Josh. I saw that yesterday Oregon was the first state in the country to implement rent control. You know, I think, I'm not sure. I think it needs to be studied, but I do think that we should at least give the localities in Illinois the opportunity to discuss it. So I think lifting the ban in Illinois, which currently exists on rent control, and then have a spirited debate about it is the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you. This is from Don Davis. Don, where are you? Right over there. Who's a member of the City Club. He's with the Bronner Group, and Gila Bronner's with us today. Thank you, Gila. Is HACC looking at using opportunity zones to help develop affordable housing?
Yes. Good question. It's a very promising strategy. You know, in the past, there's been things like opportunity zones that have worked okay, but I think that there's a lot of excitement around this, where people can get capital gains tax breaks for investing in lower income neighborhoods. So we are very interested in that, and I hope to be able to use that tool in Chicago Heights.
Great. Okay. This is from City Club member Steve Greenbaum, who's with Senior Housing Group, LLC. I don't think Steve's with us, but you could submit questions beforehand to our office, and this is the way this one came in. His question, Rich: as a way of increasing affordable senior housing, would the County Housing Authority consider converting any housing choice vouchers, HCVs for those of you not familiar, to project-based contracts?
So yes, and we do it today. So there's you know, you get a certain amount of funding from HUD, and as you saw earlier, it allows us to help 17,600 people. So you can either let folks move where they like in the county, or you can actually attach the vouchers to projects. So this question was encouraging us to attach more of our vouchers to projects. We have an RFP every year that developers apply for, and we approve 4 this year. So yes, I think that is a sound strategy, because the key there, of course, and the housing is affordable for 20 years. So the answer to that is yes.
Okay. Rich, the question, this is from Ramona Burris, City Club member. How is your agency addressing youth homeless?
It's something that we have to do better on. To be perfectly honest, we've had a great, I think, effort in terms of ending veterans homelessness. Right? We at HAC, we help 600 plus veterans, vouchers that are specifically for homeless veterans, and there's been a huge dent into that population. But the number of children and families that find themselves without decent housing is really appalling. So we have started some pilot programs with the schools in the suburbs to identify young people that may live in shelters and provide some rental assistance. But that's something that in 2019 and beyond is going to be a priority of ours.
Rich, from watching your slides, your presentation, it's obvious that the traditional definition of housing has greatly expanded under your leadership, President Preckwinkles, and so forth. how many employees do you have to deal with all of these issues? It seems like you would need hundreds.
We have a very streamlined organization. Most of them are sitting right back there. 140. And again, in government, just like in business, you've got to organize it right, and you have to have people focus on the mission, and everybody's got to know their job. And after 8 years, I think we've got a wonderful team in place and great leadership. And there is really a way to do more with less. Of course, there's a limit, but yeah, we're proud of the fact that we've been able to manage all this construction in-house, act as a developer in-house, so we can generate some of the income that's generated from these developments. We plow back into the business. That's how we can pay for things like forest preserve experience and kids going to college, because we try to keep as much of the revenue in-house as we can so we can help more people.
Certainly have a lean, mean fighting machine, as we like to say. Okay. This is from City Club member Sam. If I butcher your name, I apologize. Iwuyo, who's with Sammy Sosa Realty, Inc. Do you use a provider to manage your properties?
So we manage our properties in-house. As we look to the future with the mixed income models, we will probably reassess that and go outside for the management. So right now we manage in-house, but like with the project in Evanston, for example, I imagine that we will use a provider for that.
Probably most people, this would be just a comment from me, the moderator. Some of the communities you mentioned, we have this vision in our mind of communities where the Housing Authority is working. And you mentioned communities that a lot of us probably wouldn't think need the kind of creative programs like Arlington Heights and Evanston, Wheeling, some others that you mentioned. Do you think the average person in Cook County in the city of Chicago would be amazed if they knew this?
Yes, I think people don't often associate the need for public or assisted housing in certain areas of the county. But we know for a fact that poverty is everywhere. But it's a great question. When we've been to a few of the north and northwest suburbs to advocate, and it's interesting as when you sit and listen to folks, I heard in one suburb where we actually were successful, not successful everywhere, but somebody in the audience was saying to the council, 25% of the kids who go to the school here are on free and reduced lunch. So 25, no, people don't associate the need for this type of housing in certain parts of the county. But the fact is, it's everywhere. I showed a slide on the suburbanization of poverty, and it's not just in the southern portion of the county. It's on the western part and some of the northern suburbs too. So I think that's part of the solution. We have to understand as a city, a county, and a country that this problem really exists everywhere. It's more pronounced in certain areas, but it exists everywhere. So I'm happy that the fact that we're doing work in these communities and showing how important these services are will hopefully spread the word on that and create more public acceptance for what we do.
Okay, thank you, Rich. I have one final question. This is from Doris Davenport, City Club member. She's with the Doris Davenport Show. Doris, next time, tell us where we can find the show. Okay, here's a question. How do you balance providing affordable housing for middle-class residents, leaving Chicago because of skyrocketing property taxes, with the residential needs of those whose income is too low for the city's skyrocketing rental rates?
Doris does she has a great radio show. I had the pleasure of being on it. We talked about this. So, you know, we know that while it's a great thing that we've had so much development in the central city and now pushing out to the western, southern sections outside of the loop, it has created this, it has pushed people out. And, you know, gentrification is something that has to be taken seriously. But the way I look at this is, you know, growth for the most part is a good thing, but we have to have policies, programs, and protections in place to take care of those folks who may be left behind. So it is true that, you know, in the suburbs, a lot of the suburbs we serve, there's not a lot of good transportation options. So all these great jobs that are being created in the central city aren't always accessible to our folks. So it's a problem, but again, I for the most part think that growth is good. It just has to be more balanced.
Okay, let's everybody give a big round of applause to Rich Monocchio.